Hi everyone, it's Dixon here, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing the brand new iPad Pro 12.9 inch with the M1 chip inside. For those of you who are new to my channel, please remember to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on my future content. Otherwise, let's get to it. The design of the iPad Pro is the same as its predecessors, which I don't actually think is a bad thing because I still think it's one of the nicest looking tablets out there. So we have the flat edges around the edge of the iPad, which I think actually helps a lot when you're holding the device. And obviously we have very thin bezels accompanied by that beautiful screen, which I'll come on to in just a second. When the iPad is connected to that Magic Keyboard, you do notice a significant amount of extra weight, and I think this is actually slightly heavier than my MacBook Air M1. So something to be aware of, because historically, in many cases, the iPad was all about being more convenient than a laptop, being thinner and lighter, but with the full setup, with that keyboard, it is going to weigh a lot. Otherwise, you'll have the regular button on the top of the iPad for locking and unlocking it, and on the very bottom you have the one Thunderbolt USB-C connection, which offers speeds of up to 40 gigabits per second, which of course is huge if you have any devices which can make use of that. The iPad definitely shouts out that it's a premium device. It's got that lovely brushed aluminium finish around the back of it, and the way it just actually feels in your hands, it does feel premium and it does feel like it's going to be worthy of your attention. When you wake up the screen on the iPad for the first time, you're going to realise just how great this is. So this offers the brand new liquid Retina XDR screen, or in simple terms, that's mini LED. So with mini LED, it has what's called local dimming zones, which means it's able to light up parts of the screen which need it versus parts of the screen which don't need it. And this particular model has over 2,500 local dimming zones. So we really do get great performance. And when we translate that, that actually means we have a 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio. The iPad now offers full HDR support, so you get really great vibrant colours for those photos and videos which support it, and up to 1600 nits of peak brightness. Throw in the fact this maintains the high 120Hz refresh rate, what you have is a fantastic looking screen for anything you're consuming on the device. It really does offer that wow factor, so when I've been playing games or watching movies on Disney Plus or whatever it is, it just really does immerse you in it, and with the brightness and everything, those colours really do shout out at you and just drastically improve that whole experience. The screen itself is not OLED though, so just bear in mind that one of the natural drawbacks for mini LED is it's not able to shut off every single part of the screen which doesn't need to be lit up. Hence you may have seen online that actually it does experience blooming to some effect. I've done a separate video which shows this in more detail, so please check that out if you want to see more, but you will notice some blooming when you've got the high contrast background. So for example, when you've got notes open with the black background and you've got white text in a darker setting, you will see like a glow effect around text and other icons, stuff like that. Does this impact my overall opinion of the screen? Perhaps a tiny bit. It is a little bit annoying at times, I'm not going to lie. But overall, when you're actually viewing the majority of your contents, if you're browsing the web, when you're reading, viewing videos and stuff, you're really not going to notice, and instead what you'll be focusing on is just how fantastic this looks. This is my first Magic Keyboard, and I've been pleasantly surprised at how it is to use. I love the way the screen floats above the keyboard. It looks pretty cool, and obviously because of the way it's been designed, it means that actually you can adjust that angle exactly how you like it with ease. The external finish of the Magic Keyboard does offer a surprising amount of protection. Obviously no good if you go ahead and drop your iPad, but it's definitely going to help out with resistance from scratches when you're putting this in your bag. Typing feels good. I don't think it's quite on par with the MacBook Air in my opinion, and also something to note is you don't quite get the same amount of space on this keyboard. So when you're placing your palms down for typing, you don't have as much room, and it's not quite as relaxing to use again as my MacBook. The same applies for the trackpad. It is a lot smaller than what's on a MacBook. So just something to bear in mind, that actually over extended periods, it's not going to be as comfortable to use as the laptop equivalent. Still, combined with the backlight and for a period of a couple of hours or so, I'd say that this is going to be perfectly comfortable for the majority of the tasks that you're using it for. Just before we look at performance, let's just review the specs that I went for. So I went for the base model iPad Pro with the 12.9-inch screen, and that means that what I have is the 8-core CPU, 8-core GPU, 120GB of storage and 8GB of RAM. So this amounts to £999 here in the UK. Now quite naturally, I really just don't think you can go ahead and buy the 12.9-inch iPad without the Magic Keyboard, or at least some form of keyboard. If you do go down the route of getting the Magic Keyboard, that's an extra £329 to spend. So that's a total of £1,328. So if you compare this to the price of the base model MacBook Air, which is £999, it is a lot more expensive. Yes, you do get one extra GPU core in this iPad, but I still don't think that justifies the extra cost of well over £300. So the key point for me is that at this price point, you do have to really choose between either the MacBook or the iPad, depending on your usage. Considering that this iPad now has the same M1 chip as the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, the performance is fantastic. All apps load extremely quickly, they perform extremely well, so it's silky smooth no matter what you're doing. And of course, multitasking suffers from no lag whatsoever. I don't think I've ever actually closed an app on this iPad. It just really doesn't matter. In one of my other videos, I did a bit of testing for gaming. So I played Call of Duty as well as Oceanhorn 2. And please check out that video because you'll see just how well this iPad performs. And this is running everything at max settings. So for Call of Duty, I had the graphics on max, I had the FPS on the max and everything else. Playing this online, and I had zero issues. I didn't have any noticeable frame rate drops, performance issues or connectivity issues or anything. It played extremely smoothly. If you do go ahead and buy one of these iPads, or to be honest any iPad, I do strongly recommend actually checking out the Apple Arcade for gaming, just because actually now having played these games on the iPad with this performance, I just think it's really worth making the most out of it. So you get a few months for free when you buy one of these, so you can check it out and see if you can find the right sort of games for you. I also played around a bit with 4K video editing, and as expected, the scrubbing and doing some basic editing on the timeline and everything was silky smooth. I didn't have any performance drops. But it's at this point I want to really just actually focus on, well, I'm saying that the performance is fantastic, and again, given that this has the same specs as a base model MacBook, it is meant to be able to perform this well, and given the massive price that we have to pay, again, we should expect fantastic performance. But the biggest problem that I still find with the iPad, while it has a lot of great apps out there, I still think that actually the majority of these are not fully utilising what we now have in the iPad. In other words, performance is bottlenecked massively because the apps aren't utilising the full power. For example, video editing, again, we have Premiere Rush, which is quite basic. There are other alternatives out there like LumaFusion, which to be honest, for a price of around £29, offers some fantastic performance and a lot of options for video editing. But naturally, we can't compare something like a £30 app to something like Final Cut Pro at £300, which of course offers many more features as opposed to what's on the iPad. And still, we don't have Final Cut Pro on the iPad. There's rumours it may come for summer, so I'll be incredibly keen to see exactly what they offer at that point. So when you are buying this iPad, you are making a very conscious decision that actually you're going to be restricting the features that you have because it is on iPad OS and not macOS. So it's for this reason I still just get this horrible feeling that Apple really still treat the iPad as an accessory, which was kind of okay back in the day when iPads were a lot cheaper. When I bought my original iPad Pro, it was well over half the price of this. But now at this price point, there is just no excuse for it, especially because it uses the same chip and they could easily port full macOS apps over to iPadOS. Now I realise a lot of this sounds negative, so obviously great performance for gaming, video editing, that sort of stuff. It is all there, and I think actually for many other people, if you're someone that wants to use it for more graphic design stuff using the pen, not something that I actually purchase, there are a lot of great tools out there. So I'm just kind of looking at it more from my perspective, but again, you really do need to make a conscious decision at this price point what your needs are from the tablet. Arguably, a lot of my favourite features about this iPad are not really pro. I love the screen, I love reading on it and browsing the web and consuming content, but none of that would require the fantastic performance offered by the M1 chip. So to summarise, performance potential on these is amazing. If someone was to ask me what would I choose, the iPad or the MacBook, I would choose my MacBook every time. Moving on to the cameras, we have the front-facing camera, which is 12 megapixel, offering a 122-degree field of view, as well as a 2.4 aperture. This means quite simply that for things like video calls, we now have something which is actually decent to use. I've really enjoyed the newly added center stage feature. So what this does quite simply is it tries to keep you centered in the stage, hence the name. So as I'm moving left to right on the screen, you'll notice it follows me extremely well and quite quickly. And this is really quite useful actually. It's been so many times when I've been in the kitchen, I'm cooking or something, moving around, and I have to try and move the iPad or I'm out of the camera. But with this, it really does a great job of tracking your movement around the screen. Focusing back on the photo aspect for the front-facing camera, portrait mode is now available on the front-facing camera. So if you want to take a really cool looking selfie with that nice bokeh effect in the background, then you're going to be pleased with this feature. We also have a wide view angle for photos, which again is actually quite cool, and you'll see on screen now it really does drastically change the amount that you can see on screen, and it's been a lot of fun to play around with. Something to note is that wide view angle isn't supported for FaceTime video calls. Also, of course, the front facing camera is used for Face ID for unlocking the iPad, and I found this to be quick enough without any concerns. The rear-facing camera then, similarly to the front-facing camera, is 12 megapixels, but it does have a better aperture at 1.8, which is the same as this camera that I'm using right now. And for ultra-wide photos, it's 10 megapixels with a 2.4 aperture and 125-degree field of view. So taking photos on the iPad historically was never something that I was interested in doing, but as you'll see on screen now, it does take some really decent photos, and because of the HDR screen, you do notice colours a lot more as well. Also, it features the LiDAR scanner, which is for augmented reality. Not something I've ever really bothered to use other than occasionally measure a table or something like that, but perhaps over time more and more apps will become available and make more use of it. So if you are looking to use this iPad as your main video call device, I'd say that the quality is definitely there. Center stage is a great little feature, so if you are kind of on the move or whatever, it is all very useful. But the camera is still obviously placed at the very top of the device, so when you have got it connected to your Magic Keyboard, you're still going to kind of look like you're looking away from the screen, which is a pain. If that doesn't bother you though, I'd say that this is a perfectly usable video call device. So with a fantastic screen, what we obviously hope for is that when we are watching movies or whatever it is, that we do also have some great sound to back this up. And the speakers on the iPad are, I think, really good considering just how slim this thing is. It's not going to offer some fantastic bass or anything like that, but I still think it's actually good enough that when you are watching movies, it does get that nice depth of sound. So it separates sounds extremely well and also places sound so that you really get a sense of where it's all meant to be coming from, all the way from left to right. And given that I love the screen on this thing, with the sound there, I've been quite happy to actually watch a lot of content with this on my lap on the sofa, not something I would do so much with my MacBook. The iPad offers up to 10 hours of battery life, and obviously this depends massively on what you're actually using it for. So as a bit of context, I watch 1 hour of Disney Plus content with the brightness cranked up and the volume high as well, and that got through around 10% battery usage. And similarly, when I was playing games, so stuff like Call of Duty, after around 30 minutes, that was around 7% battery usage. Bearing in mind Call of Duty is an online game. Otherwise, when you're just doing basic stuff like browsing the web and reading content, so if you're on your Kindle, whatever it is, the battery usage is going to be good enough so that you don't have to worry about it. If you've made it this far in the video, thanks so much for watching. It does mean a lot to me. But what you would have got a sense of throughout this video is I do have a lot of mixed feelings. I love the iPad itself, and I love the fact that Apple just keep pushing the boundaries and adding so much more potential in these devices with the M1 chip added in there. My biggest concern is that we still are very limited with iPad OS. So despite the fact it has the same specs as a MacBook, you are going to be limited with a lot of things out there depending on what you plan on using this for. As I mentioned, if you're someone that likes to take notes on it using a pen on the screen and perhaps using some of the more graphic design apps out there, it's going to be a lot more beneficial because you can make use of that touch screen, which of course doesn't feature on the MacBooks. Otherwise, if you really are looking at this price point to use this as your main device, I still don't think it's quite there. I still class the iPad as an accessory, and again, I would always choose my MacBook as my main device. Could I use my iPad as a computer for the majority of things I do? Absolutely. When it comes to browsing, watching YouTube videos, taking notes or prepping for these videos, I can do it all on the iPad. Even some basic video editing. But I would always be left there thinking, well, if I did have to choose between one or the other and I had bought an iPad, I wouldn't be able to do as much with it now as I can do for all of this stuff. So I'm going to leave it there. I think I've covered enough so that you're actually aware of the great features as well as some of the drawbacks with this iPad. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, thanks very much for watching and I'll see you soon.